In a culture of opposing opinions and challenging times, how do you get your head above water and get a breath of fresh air? You look for hope. You look for answers. And we shift from silos of segregation to social engagement in a quest for solutions. Stop talking about what the problem is and let's discuss how to fix it. Join us now as America Connects with your host, Rob Dalton.
Hey, hello, everybody. Thank you. Welcome to America Connects. I'm your host, Rob Dalton. It's nice to have you with us today, listening and or watching. We appreciate you being here. First, I'd like to always thank UBNGO for hosting and producing the show today. So Tony and his crew up there, thank you so much for being part of it. America Connects is a little different show. We don't really do the circle talk and the talk show, the recycling of modern day issues and things. Instead, what we look for are answers, solutions. We look for advice, opinions, and maybe even at some level, some counseling. We're all going through difficult times during this pandemic and just surviving life in general, actually. And it's nice to have some people looking out for you. And that's kind of what the show's about. This particular topic today, and we wanted to come up with a name that we thought you might like. And it's basically social media, the good, the bad, and the whatever's next, because it seems to be constantly evolving. So I wanted to start off with, you can find me at americaconnects.online to keep up with all the shows, both audio and video. There's YouTube links there, as well as the audio on all the podcast platforms. So look for America Connects online or America Connects on YouTube. So I'd like to open up the show. We've got a few guests, but first I'd like to start off by introducing the topic today. Social media. I'm not here to praise it. I'm not here to bash it. I'm here to help us understand how to best deal with it through this time of social distancing. Years ago, it started out as a way for everyone to stay connected digitally. At the time, Facebook was amazing. It gave us new opportunities to connect and share pictures and stories and swaps. And then it's turned into what it is. And then all these other media platforms have jumped in with Instagram and Twitter and such. And it was overwhelming for me. I'm a little bit older than maybe most of my viewers, but it's a little different for me. And there was a time where I just couldn't take it anymore and I couldn't keep up. So I will take the moment to say I'm a bit of a hypocrite. I took 3 years off social media and I didn't miss it at all. It was really, I enjoyed taking 3 years off. But then I started this podcast, America Connects, and I needed to get back online in order to market to the audience, which is probably you. I wanted to talk and pitch to people who want to hear about the show. So a few months ago, I jumped back in online and started doing the procedure and the process and learning. And boy, has it changed. Even in the short time I was out, things have shifted. One of the things that I struggled with at the time, I think maybe more now than before, but I noticed a lot of people are living double lives. They live their everyday lives at home through I'll just label it as mediocrity, but not slamming anybody. But they try to keep up with the Joneses online. You've all seen the pictures of their glorious vacations and the delicious and exorbitant meals that they go out and have or things. But they live one life, but then they try to project another online. And I found that to be a bit inauthentic. But that was my opinion, but it just didn't resonate well with me. And now that we're social distanced, I'm wondering, can we rely on social media to replace that social and physical value of having each other around? I'm glad it's around. It'd be even more difficult if we didn't have it, but I wonder if we rely on it too much. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. Is it healthy? Is social media enough to replace the physicality of being around each other? And do we put too much emphasis on likes and shares? One of my guests, Raha, has a nice opinion about that. And the other thing I wonder is we're all different. We all are. We're unique. But do we lose our self-identity when we search for public acceptance? Are we trying to be someone that's more publicly acceptable instead of truly true to ourselves and authentic? Is greed and data driving the nuts and bolts, so to speak, of social media, and are we victims or are we participants? And is that right or wrong? We don't know. You get to decide. You're the end user, so let's talk about it. I've got some guests today that will help maybe turn some of this muddy water into a much more clearer substance for you to absorb. But first, we're going to lead off the show and run through our guest, Brennan Knight. He's with Engaged Youth. I've got Raha Lewis, a journalist and influencer on social media. We have Jude Michael. He does social media studies, a PhD. And we have an in-studio guest, Dev Patel, who's also works with digital marketing and has some experience in writings about social media and internet, spending time on there. So I also like to pick up the fact that the questions for the day. Now, I don't end up knowing what we're going to talk about because I don't go through a lot of procedures of screening our guests, but they do know kind of what the show's about. But basically, do we spend too much time or put too much emphasis on social media? Or can it and will it replace the social elements in our everyday lives? Is it healthy? So thank you for joining us. This is America Connects. We will lead off with our first guest, Mr. Brennan Knight of Engaged Youth. Hello, Brennan.
Hi, happy to be here.
I want to do a quick bio. I was given something to read. I wanted to let everyone know your credentials so they know who you're talking with or who they're listening to. Founder and CEO of Engaged Youth Company. The mission is to connect brands with Gen Z and Gen A plus. And the parents in an authentic and relevant manner, which is important, while protecting both the integrity and the experience of the target audience. You've got 20 years of executive sales, marketing, operations, consulting, business development, and management, traditional and digital advertising, product and sales experience, both mobile and social channel experts. Bigger clients are Tony Robbins, Disney, Procter & Gamble, and Oakley. So I'm really interested in seeing what you have to say today. So about the topic, Brennan, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for making time today. So tell me, you've been dealing with this. Isn't a new topic for you at all. You're deep into it. What are your takes on what people need to know about social media during the pandemic and social distancing?
Well, it's interesting. I don't even know if the pandemic, it may be a catalyst, but I think the issues were there before that, and I think they're going to be there after that, right? And I think you did a good job leading into this and talking about some of the issues that are created when you sort of have these superficial relationships that you don't have to spend the time and the energy cultivating a real relationship, and yet identify with, I've given you likes and that type of thing. I think the bigger, at least in my mind, and I think Raha had touched on this earlier, is I think that the fact that these social media platforms are actually starting to try to change or manipulate our behavior is something that we really need to look at.
Okay.
You talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. I definitely want to get to some solutions, but I think we have to identify what the real issues are. And it isn't just that we're being disingenuous or we don't have real friends or we don't have, people to take us to the airport. It turns into almost, it's too expensive to have your own opinion, right? I mean, in today's world, it costs too much. And so it tends to be a groupthink. It tends to create a groupthink. And then as an individual, you become somewhat invisible. And one of the issues that I have as a marketer is, how do you go find what the real answer or the real sort of invisible consumer is, right? You want to be authentic and you want to be relevant and you want to communicate to these people, but they're fronting and you don't really know their thoughts and beliefs. I mean, we see that in the election. We see that in polls. Independent of who you were voting for, there was always this fear that this sort of unspoken support for Trump, right? And it's because people were afraid to say anything. And I think that's true with just about everything out there. I don't want to have an opinion on anything because I'm going to get, chastised for it or put down. So you get this groupthink, and then you have to try to identify who these people really are. So we can talk later about what I think we do to solve that, but I'd be interesting to hear what other people think of this. And then
From your vantage point, being involved as you are, let me ask you, in the past 3 or 4 years, what have been maybe 2 of the biggest changes that you've seen? Is it the early start of people getting involved in social media? I wonder if that's not one of them.
So there is, being obviously a youth marketing company, I do see things trending lower. And we've had these discussions with brands for a long time that if you really want to target a 13-year-old, you make it cool for them to be like the 17-year-old, right? I mean, there's always going to be this generational gap piece there. But there's no question, we're involved in a couple of online sexting type problems, and we're trying to help solve those. And what sort of scared the heck out of me was they wanted to go down to 9, right?
Okay.
And I'm like, what? And I did some research, and 9's not a bad number. So the short answer is yes. Younger kids are getting a lot more involved early, and we need to sort of address that from a censorship versus, freedom of speech perspective. But that's definitely one of the issues. I think probably the biggest change in the last few years is people are turning to social media for escapism. It's really sort of an entertainment piece for them, and it's not, it's not necessarily, they're not getting marketed at. They're literally just going into their own little world.
They're getting bored and turning to this as entertainment to some degree.
Yeah, I mean, you can, across history, you can sort of look at different, whether it was the early talkies or the, television. When you and I were talking about this before the show, when you have your young kids and you're telling them to go outside and play because they're watching the television. I don't know that it's that much different. The technology's changed, but I think the biggest issue is because they're mobile, because they can always have this device, it's constant. It's not just in the room anymore. It's not just in the living room anymore. It's everywhere. So, yeah, I think this escapism piece of it is becoming worse.
I see where it's not just the younger people that are getting started at a younger age, but people are, the young kids, they're picking social. I'll say, and again, I am no expert, but I'm starting to see where people are selecting social media influencers as their role models to some degree, and they're worried about their own personal branding and such. Is that something you're seeing?
Kind of a funny story, because this happened. I mean, it was actually like 3 years ago. A friend of my son's, I asked her, how you doing and everything. She goes, I'm working on my personal brand. I don't know about you, but when I was 15, I was like, I want to catch a wave. I was like, why are you even talking to me? So I totally agree with that. I think if you look at the fastest growing population within LinkedIn, it's the Gen Z group, right? Because they caught on that this is where they're going to do their business and drive their traffic and all sorts of things. So it's, yes, TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat and blah, blah, blah. But really, these kids are focused on business now, and they're serious about it. So
early age.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, I'm sorry, I wanted to clarify. You mentioned something about LinkedIn. Could you clarify that?
No, LinkedIn is now the
LinkedIn. Sorry, LinkedIn. I misheard.
Fastest growing network for Gen Z.
I didn't realize that. That's something I haven't paid attention to. Are you seeing shifts in attention with the client base you're working on? Have you noticed that your client bases, their focus is shifting as well to keep up with the changes, or are they lagging a little bit behind?
Where I see a lot of requests from our office is I don't know my customer anymore. I don't know who they are, because again, sort of back to everybody's in their own silos, and yet they're also sort of doing this group speak thing. There's just no identity. You don't. Here's a good example. I've got a client, and they do some insight work for me, and they were tasked to go out and find certain things on materiality in Gen Z. And you talk to these guys, and you talk to like 20 people, and they're all like, materialism is not important anymore. And then you go to their house, and they have 35 Nike shoes, and yes, it is. So
yes, it is.
the problem, and we know we can identify this over and over again, but really it is, you don't really know who you're dealing with. You have like you said, you have your home life and your home identity, and you have your online identity. And many times those don't connect. And from my perspective, that becomes difficult because, again, now you have an invisible consumer. So, what is it you need to do? Well, you need to develop a relationship with that person to really understand, and that takes a little bit of time, right? So there's no more instant, let's find out. You can't do, polls or surveys and find out this is the direction we should go for any sort of business model. It's not work. You have to engage. You have to gauge that demographic. You'd always talk about being authentic and real, and we have to engage that demographic specifically in an authentic way where they want to actually add value to the conversation instead of just sort of blow you off.
Wow. Thank you. I appreciate your input. Brennan, don't go anywhere. I want to pull you back in a little while, but catch your breath. Thank you. I want to bring on our next guest, Miss Raha Lewis, a journalist and influencer. Raha is next. A brief bio. Welcome to the show. Welcome to America Connects.
Hi. It's so great to be here. I mean, I could talk your ear off. I hope you're ready.
I accept your challenge. A brief description, Ra, is an influence in entertainment and fashion, pop culture. She also cares about her journey to where she is and who she's met along the way. I like that part. A proud single mom, she's written for the LA Times, People Magazine, and In Style. Now a resource in the media and fashion industry. So again, welcome to America Connects. I'll start with you. The same question. Can it and will social media replace social elements in our everyday lives? And is it healthy? What do you think? What's your experience?
Yeah, I don't think it can replace real social interactions in real life. And
Okay.
the reason is because when you have a really great conversation with someone, in my opinion, what's happening is two hearts are connecting. And I know that sounds kind of hippy dippy, but when you're real, who you really are, and your real care and your kindness and your interest in this other person's story is grabbed, and that other person shares that with you, there's a connection there that's like, wow, you know?
Yeah,
And
it's real.
You can never get that on social media.
Yeah.
Because like what Brennan was saying, on social media, you're getting the 85th picture under this, filter with these stars. And that's not what's in here. Not
Right.
to say it's bad, but I think what's important is you know the difference. So you could go on social media, hang out, see what everybody's doing, but just don't go to the coffee pot for milk. Don't go there to be nourished in a healthy way, because you may not necessarily be. You might. I mean, you might have find a stray dog, and because of Facebook, like I said, be able to find it with its owner. Great.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's a real thing. But you might also get caught up in, oh, I don't have that car. Ooh, I like that shirt. Do I look fat like that? If I would wear that, and that's not real social interaction, in my opinion.
Right.
And
Living. Right.
you're just kind of getting, you're getting a twisted version of it, and like Brennan, you were saying, we're being manipulated by these social media people. So they know what we click on, they know why we click on it. So when you're talking to someone, even on social media, are you really talking to that person, or are you talking to the person that's excited that they're engaging with you because it's going to get them more likes?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. It's something we have to be aware of.
Yeah.
And I like the way you defined it. How do you, I know you're in social media professionally, but you also do it for your own personal connections as well. How do you find the balance?
Oh, man, I still haven't found it.
You're still looking for it?
I'm still looking for it, because what ends up happening is I go through these phases like you with your 3 years, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take a month off, right?
Okay.
And then after maybe a week and a half, my friend says, oh, did you see so-and-so posted such and such? I'm like, oh. And then I go check it, and then I'm back in the vortex.
Yeah. Right.
But I think more than are you off, are you on, for me, it's about knowing what's actually happening. The more I can understand, okay, so I got suckered into the dopamine feedback loop, and I just went on and I looked, that's okay. That happens with video games. That happens with television, with email. You could totally be addicted to your email. So as long as I know, okay, I just got sucked in, let me take a step back and let me remember who I am. I feel like that's working towards my balance. But the reality is I have to work so hard to just be myself when it comes to social media that I haven't been able to balance it. They always win.
They're good at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lots of money, lots of big brains.
Yeah.
I wish these big brains would figure out how to nourish our kids educationally. Or on Social Dilemma, it's like when they invented the bicycle, no one said, this is going to take time away from your families. This is going to manipulate you. No, it's a bicycle. It's a tool.
Yeah.
It's waiting for you to use it.
Yeah.
But, social media might come in and hey, I want to take you away from your kids. I want to do it. For me, it's knowledge. The more I know what I'm doing, I feel better about it,
What here's a question that just rolled in my head. What could, if you could go back and tell yourself something 5 years ago about where you are now and what you do, what's different?
If I could go back 5 years, wow, I would tell myself just spend way less time on social media.
Even then. Yeah.
Even then.
Yeah.
Well, this is funny because for me, I just managed to get into a healthy relationship a year and a half ago after 5 years. And it's funny you said 5 years ago, because 5 years ago, I was right at the beginning of my 5 years of I'm not dating anybody until I figure out why I keep dating the same guy over and over again.
Okay.
And it was that same time where I didn't realize, I didn't know, like I said, I wish I knew. When I post a picture and I get all those likes and it makes me happy, I wish I knew what that was. I didn't. But I just kept doing it. Like, or, that picture where you're like this and you're like, blessed to have such a wonderful day. And then like the comments roll in and you're like, oh yeah, they think I'm cute and they like my hat. And that was great. But it meant that I didn't think I was cute and I didn't like my hat. So I think if I could go back 5 years, I would say, don't go on there until you know exactly your own opinion, so that whatever anyone says doesn't make you happy or sad, because either way, it's not real.
You mentioned earlier, I wrote it down, the dopamine feedback loop.
Yeah.
And the social validation element.
Ugh.
And your body language spoke volumes.
Yeah, exactly.
And in a way, and again, it goes back to the social dilemma piece. I do worry about the younger, fragile people developing their own identities, that it can be a real problem.
Yes. And I think for that, the best thing you could do is really instill true value of who the kids actually are. I try to tell this to my son all the time. He's 9 years old. And I say, you are amazing. Like, remember how amazing you are. Be careful who you give your energy to, your attention to. You are precious. There's only one of you, and I keep saying it because I think sometimes social media can very easily make you forget that. Like when you don't get tagged in a picture, or they take 6 pictures and the one they post is the one you weren't in. And, at 40 something, I'm like, whatever, take your picture and put I don't care. But at 12, that broke me,
Yeah. That's very fragile. Yep.
At 12, I remember I had a cousin who was really good at doing hair, and now she does celebrity hair and all this stuff. I was 12 and I asked her, can you please do my hair? She said no. I cried for 2 hours because she said no.
Wow.
So I think back to that time and I thought, if I had social media, I'd be a mess.
Yeah.
Because I'm inviting 300 opinions.
Right.
And I don't even have the wherewithal to balance that with what's on the inside. So I think for our kids, really instill who they are, ground them. And I hate to say it, but in some kind of faith, any faith. Yeah. I think that would really help. I don't care what you call your God, call it higher power, but know that it's there and know that it's going to constantly be with you. And then you're not going to worry so much about, I didn't get tagged in that picture.
Yeah, you're right. It won't be the validation that you need. Thank you. I appreciate your sincerity and your candor. So thank you, Raha. I'm going to move on to Mr. Jude Michael, Social Media Studies. Hello. How are you, Mr. Jude? Thanks for being on the show. I appreciate you making time for us today. Thank you. Welcome to America Connects. Thank you, Jude. I've got a little briefing on you too, Jude. As a PhD, researched the relationship between online social engagement and mental and physical health. That's where I want to go with this. It includes both how health drives online social engagement and how social engagement comes to bear on our health. Studied students, refugees, breast cancer patients, and older adults coping with sheltering in place. So again, welcome to America Connects. Jude, I'm going to let you start off wherever you want to go, because your scope is broad.
Oh my goodness! So I feel like that's a lot to handle. I think what I would say in response to the 2 individuals who spoke before me is that I think maybe I come down a little closer to the middle in terms of my feelings about social media and its impact on mental and physical health. I actually think that there's something to be said for the positive aspects of social engagement online as well. And there's research that shows, for example, that like individuals who are more socially engaged offline also tend to be more socially engaged online. And so there is sort of, I think what you're looking at right now is this sort of element of what you might call like a technological lock-in. a lot of people are on social media because other people are on social media. I mean, Raha used the example of somebody saying, oh, hey, did you see, X, Y, and Z happen? And did you see the feedback that that person got? And I think one of the things that's really interesting about that is that that's a social connection. You made a connection with a person, and, it might not have been about the most authentic, faith-based, might have been somebody's hairstyle, but you did that because somebody else was online and somebody else was engaging. And so this is the television series, or this is the around the water cooler. There's also an element of like small talk that's happening on social media. So we're, as a society, we're kind of building like rules of engagement, both within social media, but using social media to build those rules of engagement sort of outside of social media. So we're sort of deciding on the do's and don'ts of how we engage with one another. And that's really, I think, kind of a good thing. The other thing that I would say is, like, you don't want social media replacing necessarily your one-on-one relationships, but, as a supplement to those, as a way of interacting more with people, as a way of checking up on people across broad social distances, which, wasn't necessarily as easy before. Or, if you think about changing time zones, or, social media makes a lot of those things really feasible and really very easy. And one sort of final thought, I realize I'm spitting sort of a whole bunch out at you.
You're fine. Yeah. It's just,
but what I would say too is, I recently did 2 studies that I think come to bear on sort of what we've been talking about, which were looking at changes in breast cancer patients' online social engagement following cancer diagnosis, and another one on individuals' engagement following COVID and sort of the shelter-in-place orders. And what you find is twofold. First, you find this sort of initial outpouring of what amounts to very sort of flash in the pan, sort of ephemeral support. So there's this among breast cancer patients, the news that somebody's been diagnosed with breast cancer does send a flurry of activity onto that person's Facebook page.
Okay.
And that's got a health buffering effect. I mean, that makes you feel part of a broader community. It gives you sort of, sort of that dopamine feedback, maybe when you really need that dopamine feedback.
Right. And you're not alone. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's, and I think then that does kind of ebb over time. There is a progressive sort of diminishing of activity on a person's Facebook page. But if you map it, right at the time that a person is diagnosed with cancer, you see this spike in reaching out for support, and then a spike in the response from friends and family and Facebook and all of those things. And one of the things that we saw with COVID, when we were sort of mapping this using more qualitative sort of open-ended survey data, is that there was a really positive, purposeful, active engagement when people didn't know what was going on. Right? People were really people really stressed and really anxious, particularly in those first few weeks following COVID. And having a really well-established online identity or sort of social presence online kind of gave you an opportunity to sort of step into a space, a public space, when all other public spaces had been closed down, and allow you to say, hey, what's going on in California? Oh, here in Minnesota, we're having these types of, how are you dealing? And kind of too, like to ask, how seriously are you taking this? Like, is this a big deal? I mean, it turns out now everybody knows it's a big deal, right? But I mean, early on in the pandemic, well, a lot of people know that it's a big deal. Early on in the pandemic, though, a lot of people were like, is this like, it seemed like there were like 1 billion references in the news as early as March. And so I think people were kind of like, is this as big of a deal as they're making?
Right. The acceptance of it was difficult. Yeah.
Yeah. And so in that ratchet up, when people were sort of all of a sudden shut in their houses with businesses closed, I think it was a really exciting opportunity, really particularly in those first 2 weeks, to get a window into how everybody else was managing all of these new demands. Hey, I'm homeschooling my kids for the first time. What resources are you using? I don't know how to do 11th grade math, right? What resources are you using? Khan Academy. Oh my God, that's a great idea. So a lot of these places, I mean, we really kind of dump on social media a lot. And I think with good reason. I mean, I think that there are significant drawbacks. And I think as social networks online start to supplant rather than supplement offline social relationships, I think there's a real big problem there. And as you're sort of getting into the younger and younger ages, I think that there is cause for concern, but I think we can't forget all of the things that sort of brought us to those settings to begin with, which were some pretty positive things and that continue to sort of hold for a lot of social media environments.
That's deep. But it's a lot. And I like the fact that you brought up the fact that social media can be used as a resource or a tool, like you said. So it has its place in coping and surviving. I'll give you that. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't really have anything to say. Like that's my whole area of research. Like yes. Everything that I do is, we know that social relationships are really positive in health promotion. I mean, provided certain preconditions are met, right? It's not like you can't be enemies with somebody. That's not gonna help much. But provided you have really positive, really close, confidants, they can be really helpful in helping you get through, difficult times. But sometimes you face these life transitions where your need for support changes really drastically. And yes. Offline social support, face-to-face social support doesn't adapt very well. When you don't have cancer, you don't set yourself up with a bunch of friends who've had cancer before because you didn't need that. All of a sudden your needs change. You're diagnosed with breast cancer, your needs change. The internet is a wonderful place to find a bunch of people who've had cancer here or across the world. And breast cancer maybe is one of the more common ones, but when you deal with really idiosyncratic or really kind of like embarrassing health concerns, like let's say you're dealing with like erectile dysfunction. I mean, who wants to go like to the erectile dysfunction group, right? I mean, not me. So I think part of it would be like, the internet has several functional advantages in terms of the ability to access support from reaching people who are much farther away with rarer conditions, or allowing you a bit of autonomy and privacy in the type of support that you seek. And that comes up a lot with couples who are coping with infertility, for example.
Okay. Well, good.
People don't want
You're
to
right.
go
That's another thing. That's another thing we have as a resource where people can fall back on for additional support. So there are many instances like breast cancer and infertility that need kind of a support group. So that's a great comment. Brennan, I want to get back to you. He mentioned how as we're going into the youth, and we brought up the fact that the more and more people at a younger age are getting started. And I think that in the image that came to mind when he was talking about that is we're going to be going there whether we like it or not. But is it kind of like building an airplane while we're flying? Are we going to be able to make this transition, Brennan?
So one of the things I think sort of address what Jude was saying, and I think sort of Raha as well. We need to make a little bit more of a distinction on this call on the types of channels that we're on, because if we talk about social channels, each one of them has their own benefit or not, right?
Okay.
Obviously Facebook to disseminate information, it's been around longer. It's a little bit more trusted. There's sort of a trusted, I would have my city friends, I live in Escondido. So Escondido friends is a great way to find out things. Raha found, I think it's Charlie, if I remember correctly, Charlie, because it was probably the same thing. It was a Facebook friend group within her city. So there's a real distinction there. And then, and then of course there's the Instagrams and the TikToks and the Snapchats and what they're used for. And a lot of times, we'll do complete channel strategy for different clients depending on what they want to reach. So to get to your point, I think that probably it does come to education, and and I don't disagree with a lot of what's said, but the concern that I have is it's kind of like, the filtering of information from and, whether it's Google or whatever it is, there are algorithms that the kids and the people know about, right? And so people are presenting themselves and putting content forward, knowing that they can sort of accelerate the algorithms and get more likes, attention. It's becoming a business, right? It's a real business. Yeah. And so most of that stuff is pretty disingenuous. Having said that, of course, there are platforms. I mean, I totally agree with you. Khan Academy, all these sort of more trusted groups that were probably mainstream before, who've just found this as another medium to distribute information. That's a great thing. The only flag I have is on these platforms that are, either gathering data. Obviously, we've heard that from the TikToks of the world, or whether it's actually just communication so that I get more likes and so that's where I think on that line. So it does depend on the channel. The channel is really important. And what was the second part of that?
If we're going to learn, are we at risk of building the airplane while we're flying it? We're just going to have to do the best we can as a group.
I'm hesitant to answer that because obviously the knee jerk is you're going to have to build it when you fly it, but I don't know that that's necessarily true. I think we can front, and I don't know whether that's through legislation or whether that's some sort of agreement, just like ISPs sort of figured out a global agreement. I think there's got to be some agreement on the rights and wrongs and what can be done and what can't be done. There's certainly lots of discussions about what's filtered and what's not, who gets to hear stuff, and whether there's a political opinion behind that or that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
but at the end of the day, we don't know what we don't know, right? And so we're going to have to be reactionary and not proactive. Absolutely. The question is, how much are we going to be reactionary, and how much is that tied to the Almighty?
Brennan, I appreciate your input on all that and recapping with your own thoughts. I want to introduce our next guest. His name is Dev. He happens to be right here in studio with me, so the image is much closer. But I wanted to introduce Dev real quick. He's a huge people person, currently running a digital marketing agency, and recently joined a startup called Bolt Insights. Now, he enjoys solving problems and has always found tinkering with things to be fun, but also researching emerging technologies and exploring the possibilities into the future. So you have done some work regarding internet and social media as well. Tell me more about what it is that you can bring to the conversation.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of good points that have already been touched on. Brennan, you pretty much are in the same field as me, kind of, or they touch bases. But I did want to talk about using social media, and definitely how each one has its pretty much each one has its own use cases.
Like we were talking about different platforms, different uses.
Correct. Okay. Facebook, family, YouTube, long entertainment kind of things, TikTok, quick interactions, everything like that. So the biggest thing happened when we were talking about COVID.
Okay.
And how
the advent of the coronavirus.
Yeah, correct. Pandemic. And how social media, kind of messed became
it was a good and a bad.
Yeah, it was good and bad.
Yeah. Which is true, because some people were going there for news and some people were going there as a resource, and the information was not solid enough to give any one answer.
Correct. Yeah. So whenever COVID happened, I think social media definitely changed. We're starting to use Zoom more, starting to, get more comfortable with people in, let's say a kind of more of a home setting.
Yeah.
And whenever we see people in real life, we're still in that relaxed mood, thinking we're back in our, our living room pretty much. And it's kind of affected, people's mentality, people's mindset more about how whenever we interact with those people versus us seeing in Zoom or them on Zoom, social media and such.
It has been a shift with Zoom. Especially.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure now whenever I see Jude or, Brennan or whoever, or Raha, we'll be, pretty close friends. Yeah, even though we've never actually met in real life.
I had a quick story about Zoom just because it brought it up and it made me laugh. I was talking to a client who was on Zoom a lot. Mm-hmm. And I said, I just assumed do a conference call. So we had a conference call with 4 people. And all the ladies were like, "This is so nice. I can get up, move around. I don't have to do my makeup. I don't have to fix my hair. I can just be on a call." So it didn't. it doesn't always take away the stress. Even though you're working from home on Zoom, sometimes it's almost just as much. But it's kind of a shift. It's just it's a fun thing that's working itself out.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to get ready either if you're in person or not, right? Right. So that's really
how far do you go?
Yeah, but it's more about that relaxed mindset that I feel like has been kind of altered.
Yeah.
Because of COVID and all of us talking, more online, this and that, and especially now that social media has become a big factor in communication. So whenever people are thinking, so at Bolt Insights, we try to help, bridge people and community, bridge community and culture. Sorry.
Yeah.
So whenever we're talking about a corporate situation, social media, now that we're using social media more, the problem has become that people are actually getting more fired over. Obviously free speech is a thing. Don't get me wrong, but it's to make sure you don't say anything stupid that would reflect badly. Now that people are engaging more on social media, it's actually became negative. A negative thing that we're the cause of COVID and social media, using it more.
All right.
Yeah.
What you had done research. Go ahead.
I have some points that Brennan. I had some good stuff, but then everybody kind of touched on everything. Yeah, I don't want to be repetitive.
Problem going last, man.
I know. It's this problem going last. All right. Oh, okay. So there's actually a recent thing I saw. I forgot where, but it was talking about how social media, wherever we're using it, they're talking about the future. Where we're in the future, how we're not even gonna really care about personal connections. People will be looking literally through their phone, especially with things like, VR has become pretty big now.
VR is growing, yeah.
Yeah, VR is growing like crazy. AR, I think, has pretty much died.
Yeah.
But how that has become, kind of a go-to thing for social to interact with people. Jude was talking about whenever Jude was talking about how whenever people interact on social media, they're losing touch. Losing touch people who use social media less are more likely to be people who use in-person communication less, and vice versa.
Yeah,
that's their kind of how they are.
Right. Socially engaged leads to more versus online engaged.
Which I think it's kind of the opposite now.
Yeah.
At least maybe I don't know around my friend groups and stuff. Obviously, I'm a tech guy, but we all have VR and stuff. We hang out there, do a little bit of that, and then we still obviously go out in person and hang out. But there's so many possibilities you can do on that and have actually have fun in social media and VR, stuff like that.
Yeah. It's true. Well, good. Thanks for coming all the way in.
Yeah,
and being part of the show in person, no less, too. It was nice to meet you. And again, Bold Insights. I hope it goes well with them.
Yeah, next time I'm trying to get a spot first, so I can so all my stuff doesn't get taken up. All your information doesn't get recycled. Yeah.
Well, it's been a nice show. I hope that the show's been interesting to you. Recapping real quick, Brennan Knight with Engage You. Thank you for being on the show, Brennan. Thank you. It's expensive to have an opinion was one of your comments. Kids are learning early, and we're starting to trend to early double digits now in going online and being socially acceptable and working and training with these kids. Raha, I like the dopamine feedback loop. It's been that was an interesting. I'd heard that before, but it's fallen away. So I really appreciate you bringing that back up because it's true. And we talked about the hazards of social validation as well. So thank you, Raha, for being on the show. Thank you so much. And Jude, you had a lot of information and you packed it in pretty tight. You've got more, I know. And if we do a similar show, I'd like to bring you back on. Socially engaged offline leads to a good balance being engaged online. And you acknowledge the fact that social media and online data is a great resource for people either in crisis or in life changes, and I think that's important. I think people still need to fall back on that. So, Brennan, any closing comments?
I appreciate everybody and their opinion and input. It really helps me a lot too. In terms of social media, I think I look at it from a parent perspective, and I also look at it from a brand target perspective. And I think both of those you just need to have. You need to have some control and filters on where you go and who you speak to. But it's not, to Jude's point, it's not necessarily all a bad thing. I mean, I think it really is a positive contributor to society. It's just how we use it that's really important.
Yep. Thank you, Brennan. Ra, any closing comments?
Thank you. I said what Jude said, and only because I really like that you said if you're off social media, you're probably more engaged on social media. And I thought, you know what? That's true. And I have to actually own that. And I do, when I'm on there, and I'm commenting and I'm liking, and I forgot that that's a part of who I am. I'm a social being. So I love that, like taking responsibility for the fact that, I enjoy my time on social media. And what I'm trying to do is find how can I enjoy it more and just keep the good parts.
Okay, good. Well, again, thank you for being on the show, making time. Jude, any unmute and any closing comments?
Way ahead of you. I totally unmuted. Said it. I would say too with Ra, and who you are is great. I mean, you are a great person, and these are great people, and being socially engaged is great. And one of the last things that I would say is, there's been some hypothesizing that updating your Facebook status is essentially like a roll call. Right? Those likes aren't just likes. They're like a pool of people who are available to you. When you reach out, that's who's listening. And that's a really reassuring fact, especially in times of transition and times of stress. So I think these likes, we kind of go like they're so lame, but I actually do think that they serve a function that's more true to who an individual is, and feeling listened to and feeling like people are available if need be. So, let's not necessarily dump on the likes.
No, you're right. Okay. Yeah, they have a purpose. Dev, thanks for being here again.
I'm Dev Patel. Thanks for having me on. I mean, not too much else. They've gone over everything. It was definitely a pleasure being here, and I loved everything they had to say.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time, everyone, the audience, but also those listening and paying attention and watching at home. Thank you for making us part of your day today. We appreciate it. Thank you, UBNGO. Tony and his crew. And I always like to take a moment and thank the sponsor, GlobeRunner.com today. GlobeRunner.com, rocket fuel for your business. They do social media marketing, digital marketing. They also do website construction, and they're good people. They're just really good, young, vibrant people, and rocket fuel for your business. GlobeRunner.com. Again, I'm Rob Dalton. This has been a great show on social media, the good, the bad, and the whatever's next. And we all know that's going to shift. So thanks for being a part of it, everyone involved, and those at home. Thank you. We appreciate you. And please do what you can to have a great day. Remain vigilant, everybody. Really stay safe. And remember, America, let's stay connected. Have a great day.